Welcome to the chaos sector. I will say, the tension is getting a bit thick in the room. We're starting to see a bit of vulnerability from the prosecution. For those who think we are somehow associated with Koberger's defense team or even know this person, I guarantee you we knew nothing of this man before this investigation. I know many may assume we're defending Koberger, but not so much. We investigate, we reveal, expose, inform, educate, enlighten, report. Our job is to present our analysis rooted in facts, logic, information, and also evidence. I wanted to point that out because I believe there is a narrative being built around the chaos sector. But let's once again keep digging into those simulations. It's as impactful as our previous series, I would say. I'm coming. Hold your freaking horses. Who is it?
I'm not sure anymore. You tell me.
You're an asshole.
I'll accept that. It means I have your attention.
My doorbell is not a toy, you know. Speaking of that, you won't believe what I've obtained. It's not really new information, but the person who gave it to me was a bit, well, interesting.
Who would this be?
The chief's terrible toddler. She came by my house the other day.
Her daughter? Bet she's just as feisty.
Yep, the only thing missing is the accent. Other than that, a carbon copy of pure, stubborn.
They don't fall far from the tree, you know. What did you guys discuss?
The investigation, of course. She believes Jack is the center of the murders. Even suggested that a group staged the phone calls from Kaylee and Madison to make it look like Jack simply missed the calls. She had a very intriguing view on how things went down. But the thing that really stuck out to me was how Jack wasn't one of the peers who came to the house. I mean, Dylan surely called him, so why didn't he come rushing to the home? That's what I'm looking into, and I haven't found any information on when, or if, he actually came to the home later that morning.
Well, the only way to find out is to keep investigating. We can't rely on the department to help. We're on our own.
She sent me an email, I'm assuming similar to what her mother sent us. Let's check it out. By the way, where's John?
Probably still at his office desk, trying to figure out a way to overthrow the department. Nah, he should be on his way, unless he has other things to do. Let's see what she sent you.
All right, here goes.
Good day, Detective Jane. Glad you decided to view this presentation. I want to first say, the department shouldn't have taken the direction they took in this case. They knew it would lead to many questions, suspicions, and accusations, contrary to what they are reporting to the public. I do not believe Brian Koberger is even a suspect, let alone somehow relevant to Moscow in any way. He may be relevant by close proximity, such as shopping, traveling between the two cities, but we can say the same for Moscow residents into Washington. I can't prove anyone is 100% innocent nor guilty, which leaves the door open for all in question. I am not here to cause confusion, as there is already enough to go around. I am here to pick away at the inconsistencies, oddities, and all relevant parties associated with the victims and housemates as a whole. Click a tab of each analysis to get started. The controversy surrounding the surviving housemates has raised many questions. Were they involved? Were they scared to tell what happened? Why didn't they call the authorities? And who did they actually encounter that night in the home? These questions have put them in a suspicious corner. Dylan's accounts are what the public have criticized, and Bethany's accounts are not as vital to the case, due to allegedly not being awake during that time frame. But as you know, the department's report of what Dylan claimed to have happened is simply not credible if she were to be a witness in a future murder trial. Let's revisit her accounts, specifically the following morning, which is what I want to focus on the most. Quote, on the morning of November 13th, the two roommates called friends over to their house because they thought one of the victims on the second floor had passed out and wasn't waking up, police said. This would be your department stating this, by the way. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call from one of the roommates' phones requested help for an unconscious person, police said. Responding officers then found the four victims. Authorities said they do not believe anyone at the house at the time of the 911 call was involved in the murders. Unquote. Now, before we break this down, there are two completely different versions of this scenario. I will get into that in a moment. But the authorities stated they didn't believe anyone in the house was involved in the murders? A belief is not a fact, and it's definitely not how you investigate a quadruple murder crime scene. With this type of so-called detective work, a killer could be standing right in front of them, and they would be oblivious to any red flags. That's if we were to believe your department was incompetent, and we know this isn't the case. Anywho, there is another version of that morning, which has a completely different scenario, and a very detailed chain of events. Quote, the best friend of one of the University of Idaho murder victims called 911 when he found his pal stabbed to death in bed, according to a shocking new report. The unnamed friend checked the pulses of Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle at their Moscow home before raising the alarm. Sources told News Nation that the, quote, best friend called cops from the phone of roommate Dylan Mortensen, who said she saw a black-clad figure in her home on the night of the killings. Unquote. The questions here are very important. First of all, it appears bodies had been moved around. What do I mean? Ethan was reported to have been discovered deceased in the doorway of Xana's bedroom. Quote, Gonzalez and Mogan were killed first, and after, Chapin and Kernodle were killed on the second floor of the house. Chapin was murdered in the doorway of Kernodle's room. Kernodle apparently attempted to fight the killer by repeatedly grabbing the knife from the suspect. Unquote. Yet, how could his best friend discover him deceased in Xana's bed? Someone doesn't have the facts straight, or Ethan's body was moved to create a different physical chain.
Ethan can't be discovered in both locations, Jane. I think she's right, his body had to have been moved. These reports are very alarming, because they are presenting different scenarios, from different articles. The friend came over, and he would have moved Ethan's body to the doorway? Or, he moved the body to the bed. Since he would have saw Ethan's body before the department arrived, and they claim his body was found in the doorway, what in the hell is going on here? Also, the report claims that the authorities were first to respond to a call about an unconscious person. How were they the first responders? That should have been the paramedics. When the call was made about an unconscious person, dispatch would send paramedics out first, because they are the immediate source of medical assistance, right?
I agree. A lot of confusion about what was said, who said it, and who initially arrived at the home. Different scenarios were presented to news media. I guess they can't get their lies straightened out.
If it was a friend who called about an unconscious housemate, then dispatch would send paramedics out. But I noticed they didn't go into detail about that very interaction between that friend and dispatch. Because they would ask him, are they still breathing? Or, do you feel a pulse? In the scenario of an unconscious housemate, this was never reported. But in the scenario where the friend had discovered Ethan and Xana deceased, they provide details of his awareness to call due to those discovered dead bodies. So, we have two different settings that morning, simultaneously dispersed out through the news media. And even more so, the fact that there are two different scenarios of who was depicted as unconscious. The department claims it was the surviving housemates who had called friends over due to one of the peers unconscious on the second floor. Yet, in another account, it is Dylan who was depicted as unconscious. This is a bunch of bullshit. I'm getting very frustrated.
Yeah, this is starting to pinch a nerve. It's the lies, Joe. They can't straighten them out.
Their physical location of Ethan's body has his body being moved from its original position of his death. Which means someone had moved the body before, that's right, before the authorities arrived at the home. Which is a felony. I'm getting downloads. Ethan's body was initially in Xana's doorway. His so-called best friend, with help from other students who were there, moved the body back to the bed, cleaned themselves up, several hours later, called 911. If his body was discovered in Xana's bed, he's depicted as being stabbed while asleep. But, if his body was discovered in the doorway of Xana's bedroom, there was a physical struggle. Reports claim that Xana put up a struggle to make it appear Ethan was already murdered. Do you understand?
That's very clever.
Yet, if Ethan was discovered in her doorway, this would mean they both, yes, they both, put up a struggle. And that, my friend, would indicate that there were multiple killers in that home. And since this would be on the second floor, right across the hall from Dylan's bedroom, there is no way she wasn't aware of this violence. I believe she called other students over, and they tried to figure out a plan. It was reported in an article that Dylan had passed out and even Bethany was hyperventilating. Sure, we can say this would be their reaction to discovering their housemates deceased. But hold on, not so fast. We know for a fact that Dylan was aware of the attacks, so her passing out, if it did happen, would not be for that discovery. The students come over, they're brainstorming how to make it all make sense. One of the students tell Dylan and Bethany, quote, "The cops are gonna think you guys did this, there is no way you can avoid it, we need an alibi that proves you didn't know what happened," unquote. And it is at this point, Dylan realizes the danger, the likelihood of being arrested for murder, or at the least, an accessory. She passes out, Bethany damn near passes out as well, as she hyperventilates, and the students call 911. And this is where the quote, "called about an unconscious person," comes into the scenario. It's very possible that it unfolded that way, and I would even say that's likely what happened. Furthering that theory, no report claims that Dylan discovered her housemates deceased. They allude to her doing so. Some articles claim she discovered her housemates unconscious, so she called friends over. Other articles claim that Dylan called friends over about an unconscious housemate, then ironically she passes out, the friends call 911 about it. And another article claims the friend of Ethan discovered him dead, then called 911 about it, while we assume Dylan was unconscious. All of this misdirection, and flat-out conflated scenarios of what happened later that morning, aligns with how they tried to figure out what to do about the dead bodies in that home. Their actions, and attempts to create an alibi, resulted in how the authorities and news media tried to justify it all, with numerous conflated articles and accounts of what happened. And the reason being? Dylan and Bethany discovered their housemates deceased, and didn't call 911. They decided to call friends over first, which is literally a felony, obstruction of justice. That is a serious crime, especially when dealing with homicides. And if we backtrack to earlier that night, well, it all comes full circle. So at the very least, we have 2 housemates charged with obstruction of justice, and even accessories to those murders. That's a wrap, my friend. There is very shady and malicious activity going on, which is making me a bit angry. Now let's get back to Miss Mortensen. It is alleged that she was the one who was so-called unconscious, as the so-called best friend of Ethan used her phone to call 911. This would mean that she discovered the same fucking thing he did, right? But it is not reported this way. There is no report claiming Dylan discovered her housemates deceased. So what the fuck is going on here? Why would this be alluded to, instead of just reporting she woke up in the morning, discovered her housemates deceased, and called friends over because she was fucking freaking out? How hard is that to do? And also, I forgot to mention this as well. Your captain, yes, your so-called captain, clearly has some questions he needs to answer. He gives a report of the previous activity that night, but leaves a few things out, which raises eyebrows. Now, I notice that he has all the necessary information about the victims, such as the time and location of their previous activities. But, as far as the 2 surviving housemates, no information is specified. Quote, Gonzalez and Mogan were at a local bar, and then a food truck, before heading back home around 1:45 a.m. Kernodle and Chapin arrived home from a frat party around the same time. Around 1 a.m., the 2 surviving housemates returned from other places in the community, and did not wake up for some time. Unquote. Since when do you not report where witnesses were physically located, and the time in which they were at this location, in a murder investigation? Return from other places in the community? What in the hell is this? This means they could have been anywhere, right? What if they were in a setting where a white Hyundai Elantra was parked? Perhaps even pretended to go out, then came back home? What if they came back home with the killers, before the other housemates came back? The public was never given this information about their whereabouts, which leads to suspicious activity. There are claims that Dylan had called her peers around 4 a.m. about the noise her housemates were making. But to just skip past all of the hearsay, even though it's allegedly from one of the victim's family members, we're gonna focus on the more likely scenario with these phone calls. I believe she did in fact call them to see if they were all dead. After the attacks, after all of the screaming, the dog barking, it was complete silence from those housemates. Dylan locked herself in the bedroom because she didn't want anyone who may have still been alive to attempt to plead for her help. The killer swiftly left the home, not casually walked past Dylan as she claims. Ethan would more than likely be that person, as he was found deceased in the doorway. Dylan knew that if no one answered the phone, then they were all dead. It doesn't make sense for her to call her housemates, merely about a noise complaint. She doesn't strike me as someone who is very, formal in how she interacts with her peers. She seems loud, confrontational, not afraid to tell someone off. And this would mean, if it were about a noise complaint, she would walk upstairs and give Kaylee and Madison a piece of her mind. So she never called about a noise complaint, rather, called to find out, or better yet, make sure, they were all dead. Listen, it is confirmed that Dylan knew her peers were being attacked. As you know by now, I'm not one to give the benefit of the doubt more than once. She has surpassed that initial benefit. They arrive home first. No location was provided in the police report of these two housemates. One of them has a shaky account of what she witnessed. The killer walked right past her, and they both never called the authorities upon discovering their housemates deceased. Right off the bat, we're thinking suspects, without a doubt. And it is this investigative instinct, which was abandoned by the department. There is no way possible, they are not interrogated. But there is a way apparently, because it fucking happened. You know what, I want you to click the next tab, before I break my computer. Click the next tab. Please.
I'll just stop right here, because this is enough. Joe? What are your thoughts on this?
A cover-up, tampering with evidence, fabricating a witness's account, obstruction of justice, accessories to murder, and possibly primary suspects in the murders. There are a slew of criminal charges, and sadly, the more devastating ones are what the department committed. They don't provide details of where the surviving housemates were prior to the murders. This is a clear sign of protecting them. That's what stands out to me the most. We've already established the peers are involved in some way, but it's what the department did that disgusts me.
That does stand out the most. If you put it into context, they would protect those two individuals, despite the trail they would lead back to, over 4 housemates? What if the department is linked somehow, and that's why they're protecting them? I mean, it's not just those two, they cleared everyone who could be considered a suspect. Could there have been some foul play in the department?
Perhaps. Drug trafficking, heck, even sex trafficking, who knows what those guys do when they get off work? It has to be something very important to keep the truth hidden. Maybe officers were buying drugs at that house, and the students had this dirt on them. But let's not take our focus off of the ex-boyfriend, because like you mentioned, he wasn't reported as arriving at the home later that morning. He stays right down the street and doesn't come over. Dylan or Bethany for sure called him. It doesn't add up. Unless he is tied to the murders. If Kaylee suffered far more severe wounds, this means the attack would have been targeted. There is no claim that she fought back, such as Granodal. So we assume she was stabbed so aggressively, the attacker made sure she died in the most gruesome way. That indicates a motive of targeting her specifically. Someone who would do such a thing wouldn't dare come to the house and pretend to be shocked that his ex-girlfriend was discovered deceased. There's too much hate in his heart, or at that point, regret. So, I agree with the theory that Jack is one of the killers.
Oh, I haven't taken my eyes off of him. What about this Koberger guy? He's from Pullman. Is he a potential suspect? I can't see one person doing this. There had to be multiple people who knew everything about that home and the housemates. In fact, Kaylee's dog was in her bedroom alone. Why would she have her dog in the bedroom alone? Wouldn't they enjoy the company of Murphy? Wait, it all makes sense. That's when the dog started barking. I see how it went down. Murphy was in Mogan's bedroom, but the killers put him in Kaylee's room and closed the door. They were about to murder Kaylee and Madison and didn't want the dog to be a witness, so to speak. This is when Murphy started barking because it sensed Kaylee was in danger. And of course, the aftermath was the whimpering sounds of Murphy. Remember, Dylan claimed she heard whimpering sounds? That was Murphy. It's all there, Joe. Murphy knew Kaylee and Madison were being attacked. And since dogs have a sixth sense, Murphy knew they were dead once the screaming stopped. And it whimpered. Shit, it's like I was there.
Interesting, you might have a key piece to the puzzle. If only dogs could talk. Well, I guess it's time to let John know about this. He'll probably spill his coffee on his computer.
You guys need to be careful though. You remember what Chief Cynthia told him. I feel like the closer we get, the more eyes are staring at us in the department. Give John a call and send this email. I'll continue with the rest of the presentation.
I'm on it. Listen, since you mentioned that, maybe I should, spend a night. It would be, for your safety.
Great idea. You can sleep on the couch I have on my lawn. Get out. This is the chaos sector.